This is No Talking in the Library, a media podcast produced by Mentor Public Library, where we'll be talking about movies, comics, TV shows, basically anything we think is interesting.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Meredith.
And this is No Talking in the Library, coming to you today from an isolated farmhouse in western Pennsylvania. I think I heard some weird scraping or groaning outside. You want to go take a look and see what that is?
Yeah, let me grab my crowbar and I'll take a peek.
All right, sounds good. Our topic today is The Walking Dead. The finale for The Walking Dead happened on April 2nd,
I believe.
That's my understanding as well. And we thought we would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the series itself and about zombie films, zombie comics, zombie video games, mostly just about The Walking Dead, but about some other things too. So just to jump right in, the zombie genre is kind of an interesting sort of subset of horror movies. Night of the Living Dead, which was made by George Romero in 1968, was essentially an independent film, and it was the first time that zombies had been sort of dead, flesh-eating creatures before they had been kind of magically resurrected or there was some sort of voodoo dimension. But Night of the Living Dead was the first time, their first sort of appearance as these kind of shambling, flesh-eating monsters of the kind of modern type that we've come to know. It was made for $118,000, which even in 1968 was not that much money. It eventually grossed about $18 million. And George Romero basically said that he wanted to kind of make these zombie films relevant to the moments in which they were being produced. So in 1968, Night of the Living Dead was very much about race relations. The main character, who's played by Dwayne Jones, who was in about 4 B movies after that and then was never in anything ever again, is African American. The rest of the characters are white. And everybody who dies in this movie dies because they have some flaw. There's parents whose child has gotten chomped, and the mother is sort of overly loving or permissive and can't come to terms with the fact that her child has been chomped, and so ends up, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think she ends up getting, she doesn't even get chomped, she gets killed with a bricklayer's trowel or something like that. So everyone eventually gets killed, and then finally, sort of in the morning, the only person left is the main guy, and he sort of goes out of the house, and some bubba just shoots him, ostensibly because he thinks he's a zombie, but the sort of point that I think the movie is trying to make is his flaw was that he was black.
I haven't seen a ton of zombie movies, so I definitely haven't seen any of these classic ones. I think 28 Days Later is the most experience I've had with zombie films. I'm
not a huge fan of horror movies. 28 Days Later I have something to say about in a minute here, but just to go on with George Romero's movies, he then made Dawn of the Dead in 1978, which was made for $1.5 million and grossed $55 million. And the point of that movie was consumerism. So you've probably heard, especially because Zack Snyder, who can't resist doing grim things, remade the movie in 2004. But the original Dawn of the Dead from 1978, society is sort of collapsing, and the main characters post up in a shopping mall, and they manage to lock the zombies out, and then they just go nuts, and they live like the sort of consumer's dream. You get to go to every store and get all the clothes you want and get a really nice TV. Of course, there's nothing really on because society's collapsing, but there you go. And you can have all this stuff, and then eventually it turns out that I think one of them gets chomped, and the others finally decide that they can't stick around in the mall. And it's one of those. The best thing the movie has going for it, in a way, I think, is everybody. There's no sort of happy ending to it. I mean, in the way that the first one didn't have one. And then after that, Romero made Day of the Dead in 1985. This was a real mess of a movie. It made less than, I think it only grossed $34 million. That was kind of the end of the road in a way. By this time, the zombie genre had the sort of zombies as post-living, walking creatures running around eating people or brains or whatever had become established. And so there's tons and tons of zombie movies. And as we were kind of saying earlier, I don't think either one of us are sort of huge fans of the genre, but I will say that I saw 28 Days Later, and I did enjoy that, and here's the reason why. Number one, the zombies don't shamble around. They really run. I mean, they move quickly from place to place, so that's a sort of alarming thing. But number two, if the zombies don't get fed, they die. And this is a problem that I have with a lot of sort of zombie things. Like, basically to make something move, you have to put an amount of energy into it, that's sort of similar to or whatever with the amount it's expending to make itself move around. So if the zombies aren't getting food, what's keeping them going? Don't tell me about some pathogen. Like, the pathogen just can't make a thing move around. I mean, there's no way that happens. So 28 Days Later I thought was actually a pretty good zombie movie. But by and large, this is sort of one of those things that we're a little bit coming to from the outside because we're not fans of this particular genre in a way that we are maybe of some other things that we're going to talk about. The Walking Dead was basically developed from a comic book that was put up by Image Comics starting in 2003. It was written by Robert Kirkman. The first 6 issues were drawn by Tony Moore, and then 7 to the present are done by Charlie Adlard. They're currently on issue 168.
I do not have time for a comic series that is in the hundreds and with no end in sight. It's one of the reasons why I kind of gave up on Saga. You can't convince me that you have that much story to tell, especially with something as well explored as zombies.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's one of those things where it's not like a new vein of something that they're just mining for the first time. And I mean, I read the entire first compendium.
Yeah, I didn't read that much. I only read the first trade, I think, which was what was turned into pretty much the entire first season of the TV show.
Right. Yeah, and at least in the early bits, they stay pretty close to the comic, although they've moved away from it a little bit. There's some different plot lines in the comics. There's a sort of distinction between some of the people who want to rebuild civilization and others who've just kind of given up on it. There's various different kinds of zombies, whereas in the show there's basically just the one kind of zombie. But it's black and white. Were the original comics in color, or is it just reproduced in?
I'm not sure. In
black and white. I just, it's the people who are into it are like super dedicated, so the people come to the reference desk and be like, yeah, where's The Walking Dead? And another sort of interesting thing about the sort of compendiums is they're so gigantic that they essentially destroy themselves constantly. So like, it's one of those things that we have to sort of periodically reorder because the books are so big that they can't make a binding that won't cause it to, fall to bits just sort of its own accord. In addition to the series, the comic book also gave rise to the video game, which you and Marilyn have played, but which I have not.
Yeah, I've been a little quiet here only just because I don't have, like I said, a ton of knowledge of zombie movies or the Walking Dead comic, but I have played the Walking Dead video game, which was developed by a company called Telltale. I believe the first part of it came out in 2012, and it was really an accident. I was watching the Resident Evil movies, so I guess I've seen those are technically zombies.
They're not quite like middle of the fairway zombie, but I mean they're in the same sort of.
Yeah, I think the original Resident Evil video games were zombies.
Right.
Your standard shambling, eat your brains kind of zombies. The movies are very, very loosely adapted from that. So I was watching the Resident Evil movies and I thought, hey, I will check out this video game. I'll shoot some zombies. And that's not what the game is at all, if you know anything about it. It's basically taking on the part of zombie survival that is dealing with the other people who are running from the hordes of walkers, and it's not even like as shoot 'em up as The Last of Us, which is also, kind of a zombie game.
Yeah, do you think that The Last of Us is really a zombie? I mean, I would be comfortable with calling it zombie because it's like
they're
former
not,
people.
Yeah, they're not reanimated corpses, but they are, they have their brains taken over by the cordyceps fungus.
Right.
What The Walking Dead video game is choices. So you were playing as a character named Lee, and you were on your way to prison actually when the outbreak happens. and you come across this young girl named Clementine, and it's the two of you teamed up, and you end up meeting up with various groups of survivors. So it is very much like the TV show, but it's not quite the same characters. And it really, really hurts because it's not an easy game to play, because you end up having to make these choices, and the characters respond differently to you as you make these decisions, and your choices have consequences, very much real world like. And the one that sticks out in my mind the most is that you get a small cache of food, and it's up to you. The other characters have designated you the person who makes the choice of who gets food, and there's not enough food for everyone. So you kind of have to walk around and decide, like, who gets a granola bar, and the person who doesn't get the granola bar, it pops up on the screen, like, this character will remember this for every choice you make, and it's just really horrible.
Right. Well, I mean, that's sort of like the thing about zombie movies. I mean, there's this sort of kind of slasher genre of which some zombie movies are a part, which is just about them, like, going around, devouring people or whatever. But the game, and I think this is the way that it kind of links up with the series, is that it's meant to be more about the people than the zombies. So I keep wanting to play this game, but I also want to be in the right frame of mind when I do it.
You'll never have the right frame of mind. I played this game in one sitting, and it's literally the only video game that had me in tears. I was just crying the entire last sequence, where you have to, like, it's conversational too, so you have to choose how you want to respond to people's various queries, and, like, I'd have to stop to, like, wipe my eyes to read the, like, choices on the screen, and it's devastating.
Wow, that sounds really lovely. I'm going to definitely head out.
Jump right into that.
Yeah, head down to GameStop and see if I can find some copies of that. I say copies because there's like 5 iterations of it now or something like that.
They're on the 3rd, but there was like an in-between series too. But I only care about the main. Clementine, the girl, becomes the main character as the series goes on, and you just want to protect her. Every choice I make is to protect Clementine.
Just remember, you can't protect people.
Yeah.
You can only look after yourself. So the series The Walking Dead was developed by Frank Darabont, who wrote and directed a bunch of Stephen King things. He was the writer and director on Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile and The Majestic and The Mist. The series debuted on AMC in 2010. This is sort of when AMC was really kind of gearing up to be a producer of their own content as opposed to what they'd been, they used to be. I mean, didn't AMC stand for like American Movie Classics, and didn't they used to just show like colorized movies or something like that for years and years? Darabont actually was only part of the project until he was fired in 2011, and if I recall correctly, his agents are actually, he and his agents are suing AMC for something like $280 million, which, if nothing else, tells you how much money is being generated by this series, since if there's $280 million to be sued for, that's, considerable pool of possible damages. The showrunner for the last 3 seasons has been Scott Gimple. It's been a pretty stable organization running it for the last few years. Once again, I don't think either of us have watched a huge amount of this.
I've only seen a season and a half. The second season, the characters get to a farm where they just stand around for like 6 episodes, and actually I've heard that that's the most boring season, so I guess I could jump back in, but I just haven't found the urge to. Right,
yeah, I think I made it about 1 season further than that, like to the season where they're in the prison, and I'm a little zombied out, I just don't, it's not a genre that I find like hugely entertaining, although let me just say, it should tell you something that we're taking the time to talk about this, because we know that lots and lots of people are passionately interested in this, and if you work the reference desk in a library with a media room, you definitely get lots of questions about when's the new season coming out, do you have the back seasons? People tend to sort of really fixate on this show. And it's, I will say too that at its best, it's really well done. I mean, it really is, it's very character-centered. It has, in a way, it's kind of like Band of Brothers in the sense that the cast kind of changes because people eventually get chomped. I guess I like that about it.
Yeah, it's really impressive that the show has managed to reach such a wide audience because everybody loves it. It doesn't matter, like, age or gender, everybody loves The Walking Dead. And the series eventually spawned a spin-off series called Fear the Walking Dead, which is a prequel.
Right, that's their sort of summer time killer or whatever. I mean, I saw like half of the first season of Fear the Walking Dead, and I was kind of hoping that what it would be, I mean, the thing that I find sort of most interesting about the zombie genre, to the degree that I find it interesting, is kind of what the outbreak moment is like. And it doesn't quite, I mean, it's sort of like just after that, and people are they have sort of flashback scenes into the outbreak. But you don't really see that in the original Walking Dead. I mean, the first part of the opening scene in the original Walking Dead is the main character waking up in a hospital
ward.
Which
is a literal ripoff of 28 Days Later.
28 Days Later,
Same
yeah.
opening.
I mean, it's fun. Now, of course, 28 Days Later came out in 2002, and then the comic started in 2003. So in a way, it was the comic that actually ripped off 28 Days Later, and then because that was canonical, they had to do it with the show. But yeah, you're really right. The people are really very, very excited about this show, and a lot of it is really well done. I mean, it's really well written. The characters are really kind of interesting. It's just the question you have to ask yourself is, how interested am I in watching people get eviscerated by The Walking Dead? And if the answer is not that much, then probably it's not like maybe the thing you want to spend your life minutes watching.
So because neither John nor I actually watch The Walking Dead on a regular basis, we brought in a couple of staff members who do. So today we have Robin from Circulation and Mary from the Children's Department. So the thing that's actually interesting about The Walking Dead is that on the surface it really seems like it's a niche kind of show. It airs on a cable network.
Right, it airs on AMC. It's based on a comic book, which is popular, but it's not exactly DC Marvel superhero comic book. And it's about zombies, and it's violent, so it doesn't necessarily seem like the kind of show that would draw a lot of viewers, but it really does. It gets anywhere from 10, 12, 15 million people watching the show every week. So my first question here for you guys is, what exactly drew you to watching The Walking Dead?
Well, for me, it was recommended to me. I did not watch season 1 until my son said, "Oh, you should watch this." This right before season 2 was going to start. He goes, "You got to watch this." So I binge watched all of season 1, and of course I got hooked. For me, I love survival stories. More than the zombie aspect, I like to watch how people survive, how they get out of situations, how they use the materials they have available to them to survive. I've always loved survival stories. That's the big thing for me, what I like most about The Walking Dead.
And I, just like Mary, did not get hooked on the show right off the bat. I heard about it through word of mouth and decided to try it. Binge watched the first season and went on to season 2, and just really fell in love with the characters, and I just needed to know how this was going to end, and it's yet to end, and it just keeps going, so I'm going to just keep going with it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that both of you binge watched the first season. I mean, this is a kind of show that it's really pretty grim, so it's binge watching it's really a commitment, because you're going to see a lot of people getting chomped. I mean, it's not the kind of thing where you're going to sit back with like a bowl of ice cream and something nice. It's like it's really gory and brutal. So I'm impressed with both of you that you managed to come to it this way. So you were saying sort of that the thing that attracted you to it was not so much an obsession with zombies, but liking to see sort of the story, the underlying story. It's been on for sort of a long time now. Like, what is it about it that keeps you engaged, keeps you watching with it?
I will say the suspense. Each season ends on a note that you have to watch the first the first episode of the next season. The cliffhangers that they leave you with, that's what's going to keep me watching the show, and just the love for the characters and get to know what happens.
Right. I like all the storylines. I love the characters. And they change. My favorite characters change from season to season. It used to be Daryl. Daryl was it. Now I'm kind of liking Negan, even though he is a bad guy. But I love the storylines. I love the cliffhangers. And I just like that they're introducing new characters all the time. So there's always somebody new that you need to get to know and find out about. See what they're going to do and what's going to happen.
So you mentioned the character of Negan, and like you also said, he's the villain of season 7. And is he your favorite villain? I know that each season sort of has a different set of adversities for our characters. I believe one of them is a character called the Governor. There's a farm of horrors, I think.
Right. There's the season they spend in prison, which being in prison is kind of better than being out of prison.
So what is it about this Negan character that you like?
Everything. He's very charismatic for a bad guy. He's very charming. He's funny, but he's also very mean. He's got a very sadistic side. You've probably heard about his barbed wire bat that he's named Lucille, which is kind of his enforcer, which if you watched season 6 when they introduced Negan, you saw how he used that bat, which kept us hanging on to see what was going to happen. But then since then, they've shown some funny sides of Negan. You have to really watch and listen for some of the things he said, because sometimes you can miss him. But I think he's funny. I think he's charming. But he also could be very brutal and very mean. But I just love how charming he is.
I agree totally.
And he's good looking.
Mary and I often discuss our love and hate relationship with Negan. He batters our most favorite characters throughout the show, but he does it in a way that is so charismatic, witty, and he is just so handsome. You have to love him,
Yes, we love him.
We love him.
In fact, if I had to choose, I'm almost at the point now where I'm thinking about if I really had to choose to go to Negan's camp or stay with Rick, although I know that Negan's probably going to get it in the end because he's the bad guy. I don't know. I might kind of swing towards Negan's side for a while.
Well, okay, let me jump in again then. You say that you almost want to jump sides from Rick to Negan. How is it watching the show when Rick is your main character and his crew are the characters that you've been following for all these seasons? Is it hard to watch when they do things that are just as bad as the things that the characters who are ostensibly the villains do?
No, I don't think so, because I think the difference with Rick's group is, yes, they do have to do these bad things, but they only do them, I think, when they're forced to. They do it to survive. I think some of the other villains in the show, like the Governor, and maybe not so much Negan, but the Governor, and there was also Daryl's brother in the earlier seasons. I think sometimes they just like to do bad things because they enjoyed doing those things. There was nothing good about those characters. They were just plain out bad.
I do not think Rick is just as bad as Negan and the Governor. I think that Rick's group does it, like Mary said, to survive. And that's what I love about this show is it's not about the walkers per se, but it is more about surviving with these other characters that are still alive. That's what really a big part of the show, I think, that really keeps me watching that too.
Yeah, I guess Rick has more of a conscience than maybe some of the other villains in the program. I mean, even in this latest season when they were out of weapons and they needed weapons and they found out about a community that had weapons, they could have gone in there and annihilated or took them by force, but they tried to make a deal and they tried to do it without killing other people. Unlike somebody like Negan would have maybe just come in and bashed their heads in and took what he wanted.
One example too is Morgan's character. who really tries to do everything he can to not have to kill. That's his thing. He does have to resort to that, but he would much rather send the wolves on their way. The wolves was another gang.
Yeah, I didn't like that about him. I thought sometimes he let too many people go.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't have. And sometimes it comes back to bite you.
So I think what we're hearing here is that if you do bad things but you feel sorry about it, or you talk about it a lot beforehand, that makes it better. Anyway, so one of the things I was sort of interested about hearing about from you guys as real fans of the show is that at the beginning of season 7, the end of season 6 ended in this really intense cliffhanger, and then the beginning of season 7 resolved the cliffhanger, but in a way that a lot of people seemed to feel they were not satisfied by it, or there was a lot of controversy about that first episode in season 7. So I was kind of curious what you guys thought about how season 7 started off.
For me, season 7, I watched the majority of it with my hands in front of my face. It was devastating, to say the least. We knew that the Rick's group would prevail, and that's another thing that keeps you watching, is you really need to, you get so attached to these characters, and when you see Negan do what he did with his bat, Lucille, it's just, it's devastating, rips you up.
I loved it. I loved the season premiere. I spent all summer analyzing the last episode and the position of where all the characters were to see who met Lucille. I don't know if there's anyone watching or listening who hasn't watched yet, but spoiler alert, I don't want to give any spoilers away. The start of season 7, you found out who met Lucille at the beginning, but then there was also another surprise. So it was pretty, I enjoyed it. I don't want to say I enjoyed it, but I loved it.
Yes.
It was very suspenseful. I think Robert and I were, and another co-worker, I think we were texting through the whole program like, Oh my God, what just happened? How could that be? I did not see that coming. But when we found out who met Lucille from last season, we had it right. We knew it had to be one of two characters, a couple characters. But yeah, I studied. I think I even took a still shot I found online of where everybody was and where Negan was standing when it happened. It was pretty cool.
So it sounds like this most recent season has been really thrilling for both of you to watch. Would you say that the current season, the season that just finished, was that your favorite season? Or is there something in an earlier season that happened that you enjoyed a lot?
I'm going to say this is my favorite so far. I loved between the end of last season and the start of this season. I liked those two. So far, I think I like those the best. There's some parts of this season I didn't like at the beginning, how it almost seemed like Rick might have given up. And you wanted to just slap him, like, come on, this isn't the Rick we have seen for the last 6 seasons. You need to snap out of your funk that you're in. And I'm not going to tell you if he did or not, in case you haven't seen it, but it's pretty awesome.
I fell in love with this season. This was one of my favorites. I also enjoyed season 2, was it, on the farm? That one was just, I thought you really got to know the characters even more. I don't know. This season, though, season 7 was definitely the most intense, I would say.
Very intense,
Very
yeah.
intense.
Very intense between the end of last season and this season, yes.
Yes.
So you've talked a lot about the things that you really like about the show, and obviously there are a lot of them because it's kept you watching through 6 plus 7 seasons now. Is there anything that you really don't like about the show, or anything you find frustrating about the show?
There's been some episodes where they have concentrated on one character, and sometimes that's all you see in that episode is just that one character. And a lot of times you don't see what's going on in the other groups that are out there. And they've introduced a lot of groups these last couple seasons. I don't think I like when they concentrate on just one character in their storyline. They do a lot of flashbacks. I'm not big on flashbacks. I like live action. I want to see what's going on right now. I like the storylines to come together a little bit more rapidly, but I guess, you do have to stretch out the season.
I do like flashbacks. I think it allows you to get to know the characters more on a personal level. The season, let's see, I think it was the second half of season 4. I did not care for as much. That was when Beth was in the hospital. She was captured and kept in the hospital and made to work there to, I guess, earn her keep and her safety, but it did not work out in her favor. The reason being is because they really focused a lot on her, and Noah was one of the characters introduced in that season, which I did like him, but it did not give you enough of Rick and Michonne and Carol. And I just want to say, Carol, she is amazing. She has come through just when you think she's at her most vulnerable. She is single-handedly taking care of, rescuing her group. So I have to give her kudos too, because we've yet to mention her. She's one of my favorites. But like you said earlier in our podcast here, that each episode you end up with a different favorite. Each season you end up with a different favorite. And lo and behold, Carol has always been high on my list.
Right, Carol has been high. She did go through these last couple seasons, a period where she wanted to be by herself. She didn't want to be part of a group. She was tired of all the killing. She never went too far, so the group could always find her. And eventually, she does come back to help save the day.
So, do you ever think that they'll fix the zombie problem? I mean, it seems like now they've come to the conclusion that anybody dies, like, they then become a zombie. So, like, one of the stock features of zombie movies has been either fix or no fix. I mean, the Romero Living Dead series, it turns out that zombies are just, there's no solution to the problem. So do you think they'll ever find a solution in this show, and is this something you even care about?
I've never really cared about that. I had heard recently, I think it was one of the producers, Scott Gimple, I think his name is, he said this show could go on for 20 more seasons. So if they do find a cure for this, it will not be for a long, long time. It's understood early on in the season that everyone has this pathogen. If you die of natural causes, you will come back as a walker. That's never really been something, though, that is on my mind in watching these shows was, will they ever come up with a cure?
Yeah, I think she's right. I mean, the only cure right now is a whack to the head. So to be able to cure them, I think you have to find a large community that has all the medical and all the technology, and there's no community right now that has anything like that. So they're not going to find a cure unless there is some society out there or some government working in some secret laboratory someplace that hasn't been affected by this virus. So no, I don't think they're going to find a cure for a while. And as Robin said, it probably really doesn't matter. That's not my main concern right now is curing the virus. I guess the main thing right now is survival and how they're trying to create a new society, because what they used to know and what everyone's used to is gone.
And if you'll remember in season 1 when they traveled to the CDC there in Atlanta, the one gentleman who was working there was no cure.
Right.
There was nothing. He, tested his wife, who had become a walker, and had seen what it can do to your brain, and at that time there was nothing that could be done.
Right.
So, but like Mary said too, it's more of trying to survive in this life. That's the focus.
So have either of you watched any of the spin-off Fear the Walking Dead?
I started watching Fear of the Walking Dead when it first started, and it didn't grab me. I have heard it's gotten better, but I have not gone back to it. So no, I have not.
Same here. I watched season 1. It just wasn't the same characters. I didn't take a liking to how it was starting and how
Except
the
for
virus...
that barber. He was pretty cool.
Oh, the barber.
He was the only one who
yeah.
kind of wanted to go out, and he knew what to do.
He knew what to do, yeah. But no, I did not get attached to it, and I have not continued to watch.
So I guess I know who I'm going to be hooking up with in the case of a zombie apocalypse happens when we are still at work.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to follow these guys.
I have a plan.
Yeah, so actually, Mary, what's your plan for when the zombies descend on the library?
We're all going to head to the mall. They have a food court. They have food. They have lots of stores, lots of shelters, everything we need at the mall. Look for me at the mall. I'll be there. And if you have any weapons, bring those too.
Yes, we've discussed that before, and the mall would be a very good place. At one time, I thought being out in the ocean or a lake would be a good idea on a
Mountain.
boat. But as we learned in the first season of Fear the Walking Dead, the boat is not an option. They float and they still kill. The walkers still kill in the water. So the mall, that could be a very good option. Yes.
Yeah, we just have to figure out how to build a fence around the entire mall.
Yes.
And then we have to break up all the concrete and blacktop and start our gardens.
Yep.
And then we have to organize, ration, until we get our food grown.
Yes. So hook up with Mary and I. We'll be at the mall.
Yeah, it's too bad that we are apparently the only town in rural America in which the mall doesn't have a gun store. I mean, really, I think that's going to present a problem for us, don't you think?
We just have to stash guns away.
Right, yeah. Well, maybe people with guns will show up. That always makes the situation better.
Well, thank you both for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. No Talking in the Library is a production of Menor Public Library. Opinions expressed are those of the presenters and should not be taken to represent those of either the library administration or the library board. Our producer is Marilyn Weiss. Our web manager is Mary Pelton. Our music is done by Adriana Crickle. And I think that's all we have for you today.
I guess we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening.